Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your media and tech-related production questions every single day. Courtney Gooden in Los Angeles is our reader today. Courtney, what's our first question?
Well, the first one comes in from Jacksonville, Florida, where Pedro G. Gonzalez III asks, when providing audio via PressBox for press, will the following box suffice, or should I spend 3 times the amount of money for something better? And he has a link there.
Absolutely, and we're going to turn it right back to Courtney for the answer. Courtney?
All right. The link he pointed to was for this PSC PressBox, which is a passive transformer-isolated audio-only press box with 1 input, and I think it's got a dozen outputs or so and some line outputs. I think it's passive, 12 outputs. This might serve okay as long as you're not having to deal with video. It's a good, PSC makes a solid product. You might look at OpAmp Labs. They make a smaller one, not as many outputs, but it has audio and video, and it has things like ground lift, and it's active, and it has a VU meter there so that you can kind of get a handle on your levels and make sure that you have a level coming in. But they have a bunch of big ones that can go up to 20 or 30 like this, and they get up to the 4,000. This is a 1 in 16 out for analog and digital signals. You might look at OpAmp Labs if you want to make the step up to something a little more expensive and handle digital video distribution as well if there's a pool camera, for example, that you need to send to this pool.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the PSC makes great stuff. So I think that you're probably okay if that's all you need. Oftentimes you end up with more outputs than you think you have more requests than you think you have, especially once you have a press box. One thing to think about when you deliver that is the biggest problem with a lot of these is grounding. So you have different grounds. So think about what power you get different potentials between the ground that the press is using and the ground that you're using. And what you end up with is a buzz. And that's what a lot of times when you see press events and you hear buzz, it's because they're not sharing the same ground. So think about this box. Mickey says this box has a transformer isolated output. So that should eliminate that, but we still worry about it. As Mickey said, the connections are pretty close together. There are, a lot of people want to put a lot of things into it. Think about bringing oftentimes I have a bunch of 2-foot XLR cables that I just use to jumper out. If someone brings anything bulky, they're going to get stuck on the end of this, on the end of something, because I'm not going to let them put a bulky thing on top of my press box. So those are the things that I would kind of think about. Press boxes are very valuable, both audio and video. It tends to simplify things when you make it work. The other thing that I have a tendency to do is I either use a Dante press box. I was trying to find the one. I used to own one, but I don't know where. I can't remember the name of it. But I used to Dante press box, or I will deliver the signal via Dante to the press box. And the reason for that is that it just eliminates we sometimes in these events we have very high voltage going over it, and even with balanced audio, when balanced audio goes over 200 amps per leg, it might pick up some noise. so someone lays it over, usually is what happens. So I think that James Helldane said also he went to www.audiopressbox.com. So those are a couple of options to think about. But PSC makes just great hardware in general. I haven't used their press box, but I'm sure that it's great.
Thanks for the question, Pedro. Next question.
Comes in from New York, David Brady, posing the question, raising awareness of the FFMpeg front. FFMate claims to be an open source automation layer for FFMpeg. Sharing is caring, and he has a link to where you would get the FFMate.
Jason Beisch has some input on this. Jason?
David, this is cool. I will admit, of late, I've been pretty lazy about this because ChatGPT is really good at helping me, get anything that I need out of FFmpeg. But in order to do queuing and simple installation, I do love just being able to hit brew and very neat thing. And I'm at very least going to have to play around with it.
Courtney, you wanted to get in on this?
Well, I took a look at it. There's a lot of people out there that have written GUI front ends for FFmpeg, and this seems to be an automation front end for it. But it is unfortunately Mac and Linux only. So those of us in the Windows world won't be able to participate.
Oh dear. Oh well. Next question.
Next one comes in from Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Jacksonville, Florida. Can you recommend an ideal remote guest workflow that maintains professional audio-video quality with minimal tech on their end?
Alex Lindsay.
I still think that right now Zoom is the best from a minimal tech perspective, but until they someday in the future do double ending, a lot of people are using Riverside because you don't have to worry as much about, on the far end, you don't have to worry as much about Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi becomes a problem when you're trying to record the remote end over Zoom. When you're doing it with Riverside, it's being recorded before it goes through that Wi-Fi. So those are the things to kind of think about there. Of course, there's Squadcast as well. We found that Squadcast is a little less stable than Riverside, so that's the challenge with that, although it could have gotten better. We just gave up on it a year ago because of some idiosyncrasies. So those are that's something to kind of think about going down that path. We do think that, as far as what other things you want to do on the far end, some kind of mic is useful. Now, what we have found is that if the person has one of the last two generations of MacBook Pro, they can survive the audio with the MacBook Pro mics. There's something about not the MacBook Air, but the MacBook Pro. In the last two generations has, they've done something with their mics and speakers or whatever their arrays that significantly improves the quality and reduces reflections and so on and so forth digitally. But some kind of mic may make sense. We're experimenting with a variety of Audio Technica, and I showed a couple of them, Muanu, mics that we tested that are like $50. I mean, we're trying to kind of find ones one of the things that we have done in the past for a couple of years is send MV7s or MV6s and everything else. But the problem is that in our budget, we want those back. We want to get those mics back. And that's been really a challenge. And so what we're really looking for is mics that will alleviate the problem without having to send them back. So $50 is just the cost of doing the show, as far as we're concerned. And so we'll send them a mic, drop ship them the mic, and let them just keep it, is kind of the direction that we're going as we go into the summer. The other thing is that we make sure that those mics are USB. So it doesn't mean that they're, basically we just want to minimize the gear that's required for that process. So a USB mic tends to work better. Also, one of the things we like about one of the Muanu mics is that it actually doesn't have a headset. It's just a mic. Usually that's a disadvantage because when you don't have the headset in there, it means that they can't listen to themselves at zero latency. The problem we have is that when we send these mics out to people, they plug them in and they suddenly can't hear us because whatever device, whatever thing they're using automatically jumps to, I see a new device, I'm going to jump both mic and headset to it, and suddenly they can't hear us. And trying to explain where they have to plug it in has been challenging. So having one that doesn't have that option where they still they're only going to listen to us, which is what they're used to. They're not used to listening to themselves anyway. They're only going to listen to us, and they'll talk through it. The only challenge there is if they put the headset into both ears, they tend to yell. They tend to raise their voice because they can't hear themselves as well. That's why the being able to hear yourself. But then on the other side, if they're not used to hearing themselves, it throws them off because they hear themselves. So it's a very, you really want them to have one ear. So oftentimes we do try to send them an IFB so they have only one ear as an option. And so that they aren't going to, they can hear the other person, but they can also still hear themselves in space. So those are some of the things that we kind of are, we think about there. As far as lighting goes, we want to get away from, unless we absolutely know what time it is, and we know it's going to be a sunny day or whatever it is. We really try to avoid windows. So windows definitely we don't want them behind them. In some cases, when they don't have lights, and you know that you're going to record them in the middle of the day, and the sunlight is not coming straight in, then we find that an indirect light through a window looks gorgeous when it works. But if clouds come by, if it's direct sunlight, all those other things cause trouble. So one of the things that we often do is we try to do a tech check. So the pattern that we try to have, and this is hard, it depends on where that person is in the remote podcasting. If they are relatively important and they talk to news companies ruin guests. the news organizations ruin your guests because they don't do anything. They just say, "Oh, you sound great," and then they just go forward, and then all these guests think that they're fine, and they're not. But you can't get through that because ABC and CNN and CBS just told them that they were great, but they don't care. This is disposable content. They actually want to look better than the guest, so it doesn't really matter to them. So they've ruined I just saw a YouTube thing with a CEO of SoftBank with a digital background, and a bad edge. I was just like,
they
really?
have all the money.
I was like, you guys, spent $100 billion on this giant thing in Texas, and you can't spend $2,000 on your CEO. Come on, man. So anyway, so what we try to do when we can, if the person hasn't been, if their stuff hasn't been ruined by the broadcasters, you can get in there and say, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you a week before." And then we get a sense of what they have. We get a sense of where they are. You try to go through all that. Then you send them whatever you're going to send them. And 1 or 2 days before, you want to try to tech them out. Oftentimes, people don't want to do anything until right before the show. The problem with that is that when you fiddle with somebody right before the show, it throws them off emotionally. If they have trouble. So you want to get through all the trouble stuff before the day of the show, because whatever pain you went through yesterday, they'll forget by the time they get to the show. That's been our experience over 5,000 or 6,000 setups. And so you want to have them go through all that pain the day before. And then when they sit down, it just works, or mostly just works, or has a better chance of just working. So those are the kind of things that you want to think about there. Typically, we want to have people show up 20 to 30 minutes before. They'll want to show up 2 minutes before, but you want to try to get them to show up at least 20 minutes before. 20 minutes before means you got 5 minutes to call. You call them right at 19 minutes before. Say, "Hey, how's it going? Just want to see if you're coming to our show." And you get them to try to come on by 15 minutes before. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to get ready, and then you're off on an on-time start. The last thing I'll say is that if you're doing, even if you're doing the live stream, if you're going to use it later, the deadline of when you start is not hard. So if you're going to do a live record of a podcast, make sure that it's right. Don't try to be on time. It's better to be right than on time, and so you do everything you can to be on time. But this whole getting ready to the second with civilians with headsets and mics, make sure that you've gotten that tuned down. Everyone's settled, and give them a minute or two. We have a 2-minute countdown. I use that for the live shows. I don't ever start that countdown until everyone's ready. And everyone's like, "Well, we could have just started 2 minutes ago." I'm like, no. The 2 minutes means everyone calms down. We spent a whole bunch of time, and we started at 2 minutes after the hour. We'll start the countdown. But that gives everybody 2 minutes just to kind of settle before the show starts.
Don't forget, this entire show is run by your questions. If you want to get into the system and play, go to officehours.global/join. You'll get an email back. You can kind of get into the process. And all during the show in real-time live, there's a great community that's online that takes care of discussing everything that we're talking about. And you get more information there. That's officehours.global/join. Next question.
I think Guy had something too.
Guy? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Alex had already said. Well, the other pieces of the puzzle that you might want to look at, Quick Link is what the big broadcasters are using. They're using these boxes. They're really popular in the BBC and in the European world. They're transitioning over here to the U.S., and you're going to hear a lot more about them over the next year. They've hired quite a few people from the industry that were working for some big organizations. So you're going to hear a lot more about them now that Skype's gone away. As far as control, how much do you have of a team that can pull this stuff in and out? We're using Zoom ISO. So Zoom ISO here, you can see I can pull in 8 feeds. These all go into individual AJA Key Pros. We could do super sources. We can pump stuff in and out. So it just depends on, do you need to extract, and do you have control over that meeting? Because here locally, I'm in Microsoft land, so there's a lot of Teams meetings. So sometimes you have to meet them where they are. So you need other devices to reach in there. Zoom Rooms can actually join a Teams meeting, and you can extract people that way. You can pull stuff in through NDI. So we like to have breakout rooms in Zoom with Tech Check available, so we can nicely drag people over into a breakout room, just like we do with this show, and we could tech check them, and we could make any changes, and they're just in there with the tech. So it's just a one-on-one. They're not in front of a bunch of people and getting derailed and embarrassed if they have to make a change or something like that. But yeah, hardwired internet's the biggest thing. If you're not going live, if you can just use Riverside and get that higher quality recording that is local, then you take away that whole stutter that can happen. A lot of these folks that you're getting around the road and they're busy, and I've seen horrible. I've been in a room full of people like at one of the big Fortune 10s, and the guest is coming in remotely from their car on the side of the road on a phone vertically, and it's like, oh my gosh. So sometimes you just got to deal with what you got and make the best of it. But if you have control, Riverside, StreamYard, Quick Link, Zoom 1080p, those are the options.
And Alex had a follow-up.
I will say that with all of the the custom AV and the Quick Link and everything else that's supporting Zoom, if Zoom ever does get around to double ending, if I had stock in Riverside and Squadcast and everything else, I would jump quickly, because everyone will dump them for Zoom, because there's all this hardware integration. So you instantly hardware integration, everybody has Zoom installed. You're not using a browser. Browser-based stuff is a little rough. So I think that, you just have a lot of little idiosyncrasies with browsers that you don't have with a app that was written for each platform. So I think that these companies will have an enormous trouble if we ever see a double end from Zoom somewhere in the future.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Paul Vall, who's in Austin, Texas. And he writes, my studio to be is 32 by 28 feet and has a concrete floor. What would be the best way to prep it? Laser cleaning and cover it? Hardwood tiles, laminate, or all-weather carpet?
Courtney, you have a suggestion here?
Well, you might think that all-weather carpet, it depends. It depends on whether it's just going to be an audio studio or if you're going to put video cameras in there. It's big enough, 32 feet by 28 feet. It's pretty good size. You could do a little podcast with video cameras on wheels. So if you're going to have anything that moves on the floor, you might look into, rather than carpet is probably the best for sound, for dampening the sound from the concrete. But I've put this vinyl planking in a number of homes that I've had, and it's solid interlocking vinyl planks. It's solid vinyl. Don't get the type of planking that is particle board with a vinyl top on it. And they make it in all these beautiful wood-looking tops on them that are printed in these nice different colored woods. And it's easy to clean, and if you get a problem with it, if there's somebody damages one, drops something on it, you drop something hot on it and it burns the vinyl, you can replace the individual plank fairly easily. They're not necessarily glued down. They're just interlocking, and they sit a little bit loose. And then if you want to dampen the sound, then you can put an area rug on top of that to make it look nice. And they're easy to clean. They're waterproof. You can get them in a waterproof version as well, especially if your studio is in a basement or some windowless, if it's a windowless room where the water doesn't evaporate easily. You don't want water to get underneath that floor and get moldy, or into a carpet and get moldy. So that's my take on how to deal with the floor. And then you have to sound treat the walls, obviously, with some sound treatment to cut down the echo, and maybe even put a suspended ceiling in there with a grid below it to absorb some of the sound and the overhead.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, so there's look, I don't know what you want to spend, Paul, so I'm just going to tell you that if someone said, within reason, not spend everything you could spend, but spend within reason, what would you do with 32 by 28? This is how I would approach this. The first thing is I would put a raised floor up. And you don't have to do doesn't have to be like 18 inches or something like crazy like that. What I'm talking about are these, or something like them. It doesn't have to be this brand, but so if you look at these little raised floors, what this allows you to do is, you can have little openings here, and you have space to run cables, and so you can fish your cables all underneath this. It is life-changing to have this across your entire floor. Now, I don't have it in my home. I'm trying to get around to that's like on the list of things that I got to do. But the one on sets that I built that use these, just being able to have no cables running across the top and all my major services underneath just cleans the whole place up. And suddenly, all the things you use every day are just available to you. And so that's the first thing that I would do. So is put that down. I'll always put carpet down. And there's two reasons for it. One is number one is it absorbs a lot of sound. I don't put anything really thick. I just put the kind of carpet you see on top of those, just the thin kind of carpet there. And the reason I do that is again, because A, it absorbs a lot of sound or reflections, not all of it, but it does a pretty good job. And number two is that it allows you to do cable management. So what you can do is you can buy 100 feet of Velcro, and it's Velcro on either side with a channel in the center that you can unroll. And what that means is every time you want to lay down cables, instead of taping them down, you just Velcro them to the carpet. And it just really makes it a lot easier to deal with that. You're not burning through lots and lots of gaff as you go through that process. So when you want to lay that stuff out, Jack asked for that. I found it by looking at the images. It is custom. I'll put it in the thing of Power Floor USA, Power FLOR, but it's custom products and services. I wouldn't necessarily, Jack. I'm not saying that this is the right one. I'm just saying that you should look at something that looks like that. That's interlockable. And a lot of these some of these are built by companies that serve the DoD, and you can run tanks over them. And they're designed to protect fiber under tanks. So anyway, but these Velcro channels make it a lot easier for you to just run things, and you cut them up into pieces, and you kind of like have a 25-foot one and a 50-foot one and everything else. And it just saves you so much gaff tape when you're trying to tape things down. Now, the other thing that I would do with you'll always hear me say, I would drop a grid. At that size, I would hang the grid. If you've got the money, you want to put the grid on a winch. So basically what you want is you're going to set that grid up so that you can pull it all the way up to being able to go up to 12 feet. I mean, you can go up to 14 feet. I guess you have 14 foot, but I would set it up there. But what you want to do is get pins in there and be able to drop with a winch. There's a couple different ways of doing this. There are ones that are built for this, but you hit a button and the whole grid comes down. Again, little thing. It'll cost you a couple grand to do it right, maybe $4,000 to do it right. Life changing, because now when you want to move lights around, you are no longer on a ladder. Like you just hit a button, the whole thing comes down, you put the lights in, you move them around, and then you get them to where you want and then pull it back up again. And you might have to go up to a ladder to re-steer them or whatever, but it is so much easier to deal with when you can bring the grid down. So that's something to kind of think about, is being able to bring the grid up and down. The last thing that I would say is that, well, two more things. One is all the sides are insulated, but are they really insulated? And so in most big studios and studios that get from your size and bigger, typically what ends up happening is they take moving blankets and they bolt them to the walls. So you can decide whether you want to do that or not, but like 5 layers of moving blankets get bolted to the walls if you walk into a lot of these studios, and then kind of usually some chicken wire over top of that, and then they run it all the way around. And so that's kind of what we see in a lot of larger studios. That will kill not everything, but a lot. You're not going to be able to float that room. It's too big for you to float it, but that will deaden most of the outside. And the last thing you want to do is think about the roof. Mickey pointed this out. If the roof is tin, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to cover it, because otherwise it's going to be like a little symbols all the time, and it will ruin anything else you did. A tin roof will ruin it. So you got to think about how to make that work. We've seen a lot of people do stuff that there's these little coils they use in gardens, and we've seen people put it on the whole roof, and it just kind of breaks everything up. It does get kind of gross over time, though. So that's the problem, is figuring out what you're going to do. Some people have grown yards on top of their roofs, and that does a great job of insulating all of that. And it's, I guess, lead or whatever that is, but you also have to figure out how you're going to do that effectively. And then the last thing one more thing is curtains. So black curtains, black velour or felt or whatever curtains from Rose Brand is what we do. And we have multiple. So we usually set it up so that, if you think about your studio here, I mean, we will run it all the way. We have the capability of running it all the way around, the studio. You put tracks, and Rose Brand will sell you the tracks for those. And then what that allows you to do, and you want to buy that at typically 100% fullness for the distance that you're covering, and that's not a trivial amount for you. I mean, that's going to be a couple 100 feet of stuff, but real thick, 100, at least 50 percent fullness will get all the way around. will allow you to control. 100% would be too much because you can't then squish it in places. But we also break that up into multiple places so that we can split it. We can move it around. We can do that. We sometimes have multiple tracks for those. Those are the kind of things that we have done in the past. And it really is all of those things in a studio at one time tends to make it pretty quiet and a pretty great place to shoot.
Guy Cochran.
I just got to ask, is this something where you can get away with a microphone choice that might be more effective than going through all this effort? If you're going to drop 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, what's a DPA 6066 or one of these mics that you just get the mic right close to your mouth? I'll put a video in chat where I actually did this. I took 9 microphones. I took a big AC condenser and put it 10 feet away. And then I show you all the different microphones. And by the time we hit that head worn and the handheld, you can barely even hear that thing. So I just got to ask, Paul, do you really want to spend that much money on doing all this if you're only utilizing this space every once in a while? I can understand if you're renting it out, if you have big productions going on, but if you're just doing this more for just you, I'd say just slap a high-end DPA with a nice either belt pack, like a Shure Axie. I mean, that's where I'd spend my money, and I would minimize all the effort that I'd have to spend on trying to soundproof everything.
Alex?
Yeah, the reason I went down this path is that a 32 by 28 foot space, in my eyes, is a multi-use space. Like, you're going to use it for a lot of different things. And if you don't make the space great at making that work, in all environments, you're constantly chasing the limitations of the space. And I chase limitations of spaces all the time. And so the thing is that, I guess I value time a lot, probably more than money. And so I'll tend to spend into things that will save me time. And the big thing is that if you do many of the things that I'm talking about, or all the things that I'm talking about, what you end up with is something that is fairly effortless to use. No matter what mics you have, no matter what you're doing, you can light it, you can do all those things, and you're able to make that work. And again, that may be way out of your budget, but if you're going to do it kind of part way, you may just find that you never really use it in the way. If you do what I'm talking about, you'll use it all the time because it's fun. In fact, if you do what I just said for a 32 by 28 ball, I'll come down and do stuff there. So it'll be a great space.
Absolutely. And just because I wanted to toss a note on that, the only thing I would question about putting any kind of carpeting on the floor is if you're going to have cameras that are mobile and particularly on wheeled tripods and things like that. This was a picture of one side of my studio that I built out. And that flat floor, we often put a camera up there when we needed to go from wide shots to close-ups. And in fact, that little depressed area to the left of that is a camera track that goes around the entire, quote, stage area. It was just so much easier to move cameras on a wheeled tripod, and any kind of a carpet will obviously make it difficult to move those things around. Now, you can get around that. If you want to do jibs or stuff like that, you can move cameras without ever moving the actual base of them. But I found that to be incredibly useful in my studio, to be able to just put a tripod that I had loaded up with a monitor and a bunch of things and an operator and put it on a dolly and let it smoothly glide across the floor. Alex, you had some other thoughts? Yeah,
I just will argue that generally how it goes over at least close cropped carpet is really a function of the size of the wheels. So, for high quality PEDs or high quality tripod, if you have small wheels, they will not go over anything other than a flat floor. If you have wheels that are 3-inch in diameter, 2.5 to 3-inch in diameter, they'll kind of go over everything.
Point taken. Next question.
Next one comes in from Noonan, Georgia. Tony Mobley asks, Alex, please do an update on how to use Keynote with the new OS.
Jason Bache wanted to get in too, but he asked for Alex. So, Jason, you want to make a quick comment before Alex?
No, I mean, Alex, I think you should be first.
I don't know what did Keynote get updated today?
Yeah, but they're kind of negligible. You can use freeform and you can kind of use shortcuts to do export. I was just going to do just kind of a random set of tips.
Yeah, go ahead. I just didn't know if there was something new.
Okay.
I must have missed that memo.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to show stuff like, video HDR playback, and then I realized I was in Zoom, and then I stumbled upon this, a keynote that I sent to Alex a long time ago, that was basically just about taking a noun project and adding some gradients to get these incredibly beautiful looking things that you can then, animate and explain, mixers and super elaborate and, very pretty things to be able to explain stuff. It is hard to understate just how awesome Noun Project plus Keynote and a little bit of USDZ is.
Alex, you wanted to comment on anything else, or should we?
Yeah, no. I think that all I'll say is that what Jason got me into the Noun Project. The Noun Project is the key to the operation. So, and I think that if you haven't seen it, it is, and it's all Jason's fault that I got into this, but I use it all the time there's not a presentation I do since I got the Noun Project.
$60 too.
Yeah. So if you do let's see here, if I go in here, so this is the Noun Project and how much, I don't know how much it is. It's worth whatever it is. But if I go, I want a speaker. There's my speakers. And so this is all the different options that I have, for those, for those speakers. But I could say I want a truck, and then you see all these trucks. Oh, no. Actually, I want a sat truck. A sat truck. Oh, never mind. Satellite. Oh, let's try this. Satellite truck. Oh, there we go. So satellite truck. I can't do sat truck. Satellite truck. There's a whole bunch of satellite trucks. And so when I'm building diagrams, I do this. Now, one of the tricks here is that oftentimes I want to use these, I like pretty simple ones like this. So what I can do is I can download from here the PNG or the SVG. So typically I'll download the SVG and I'll save it to my desktop. And so then with that, if I go into Keynote, let's see here. Let me just jump into this real quick. So this isn't really a test for the new stuff because I don't actually know what is new today compared to things that we've talked about in the past. But I'll create a new document here, and you'll see this. So if I grab this, and I'm just going to drag that, because I'm going to show you a tip that is important actually for this. So I'm going to drag this in. So now I have this, and the cool thing is that this is still an SVG, but it's as an object. It's not a shape. And so what you have to do with this is typically grab it, and then you go up to your format, shapes and lines, and say break apart. So you hit break apart. So now you have it broken apart. Now you go up here and say arrange. Let's see format, and nothing's there. So what you have to do there. So you think that you can turn it into a shape, but you can't because it's not giving you that option. That's because you have to. I would use a keystroke normally, but I'll show you this. You're going to ungroup it. So now you're going to ungroup it into its individual pieces, but then you're going to go back in to shapes and say unite. So now it's all one. It's considered one object. That's different than a group. It's a harder connection. And now what I do is I go back in here and I say now save to my shapes. And I can say this is a satellite truck. I'll just call it sat truck.
I actually do all of that on the Stream Deck with one button.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that it's different. Some things need to be ungrouped, some don't. And so anyway, but you can see all these other ones. These are all noun projects that I've grabbed onto. And what's nice about that is now, anytime I want to add a sat truck, I just click on it, and that's in my. I don't have to. Things that I use regularly when I'm building diagrams are now built in, and that's a line. It's a true vector object that can be colored, and all the other things with
radiance,
transparency,
shadows,
all the things that you want to do is there. And so that's my biggest. That's the thing I use the most. Is I go to the Noun Project and I make them shapes, and having your own shape library. I wish I had a little more control over the shape library, but having your own shape library is pretty powerful. So that's my tip for Keynote. I don't know what's new in Keynote. I'll have to go look, but it's pretty good.
Next question.
Next one comes in from London, England, in the United Kingdom. Alex 4D Goldner asked, 3 years ago, I organized an open letter from TV and film editors to Tim Cook about Final Cut Pro, about relevant features and public marketing. Is there a point in trying to change Apple?
Courtney, what's your opinion?
No. I tried to change Apple for many years when I used to work with them. They never listened to me. And the thing is, the Final Cut Pro, as I'm sure Bill will attest, having headed many Final Cut Pro users groups, when they went from 7 to 10, there was a huge outcry because they wanted to take it in a different direction. And the problem with Apple is they're a hardware company. And their software is really just designed to bring you to the hardware platform, to sell you their nice hardware. So Final Cut used to be great at doing that because it was one of the few low-priced, full-function editors available on that platform that would work with the Apple hardware. So it was great for bringing people into the Apple hardware, but things have changed now, and there are many more editors available out there that will run on the Mac hardware that are equivalently priced. They can sell it as a loss leader. You know, Apple doesn't make hardly any money. They probably spend more money on tech support for Final Cut than they make off of the sales of it. So it's not worth them putting a lot of money into marketing, especially since, they'd be better off marketing their hardware. And since there's a lot of other things like now, DaVinci Resolve, which is available for the same price as Final Cut, I believe, and gives you a lot more and a lot more cross-platform performance so that you can use it on, if you learn that particular piece of software, you can take it to many different companies that may be on different platforms other than just the Apple platform. So Apple, I don't think, has a tendency to listen to their public very much. If there's a huge outcry, they may make changes, but like I say, it's probably a losing proposition for them.
Alex.
Yeah, I think that the chances of them changing direction is pretty low. They've seen the kind of the opportunity, and I think that they're kind of going down. If you look at where they're focused on, we've talked about this many times, but if you think about the pyramid of production, what they're looking at right now is that there's this little area up here that is owned by Avid and a little bit of Premiere. And then there is this kind of layer that is fighting with Resolve and everybody else, Premiere, Resolve, not really Avid. And then there's all of this down here. What Apple wants is the big part of the pyramid, like not the little part of the pyramid. They can't think in small scale, and so the problem is that in the film industry is a small scale operation getting smaller. Like it's not from a software sales perspective, it's just not a viable target, so it's really not like Avid has that locked up. No one's going anywhere. This current generation is not going anywhere. And really where all the growth is in the industry is on YouTube. And so what you're seeing Apple do is spend a lot of time. They're going to seed the professional market to Resolve. I don't think that Motion's going to go anywhere. I think Motion is still one of the best spends of $50. I think Final Cut will still be there because Apple needs a way for you to be able to edit things like spatial video, and they need to have something where they can roll something out and know that it'll be supported. But I don't think that their primary market, I think, is really going to be in the corporate, education, social, not in film and TV. And I don't think that it's not that nobody uses it for film and TV. I know a lot of news people use it because it's very fast. But I don't think that the high-end TV film market it has proven to be, like, you talk to people at that market and what they ask Apple for are things that are very fiddly and that would take a lot of resources to actually produce and would generate, and they still wouldn't leave Avid. They'll tell Apple this is what we need, but they're not going to leave. So the issue is Apple, and Apple did that for a while and then they just kind of gave up. So I think that it's a very viable platform. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But if you're trying to ask Apple to jump into these other markets, I think that, or try to really focus on the TV and film market, that's a shrinking market that is very immovable. It doesn't pencil out for a large company to focus on it. So you just kind of have to be realistic about what makes sense for Apple.
There are a lot of intelligence that's been passed along in this conversation. For me, it just comes down to whether or not a company is trying to move the whole ball forward. And I think Apple still does that in a lot of areas. I mean, I look at all phones and they look like iPhones that came out. That whole glass face and no buttons. And that was Apple. And there's a ton of other examples I can do of the same kind of thing where they don't think about how do I make a better thing that's already there. They really do try to rethink things. I still think that what Apple did back with the original launch of Final Cut was look out and say, the media landscape is changing. We're going away from these big facilities and we're going to individuals who want to do their own work on their own hardware. And I can't believe what I can do on a laptop now in terms of complex, amazing video at extremely high quality. I mean, I've been doing broadcast for 15 years now out of laptops. That's insane from me thinking about the old days when I had to have a big, heavy-duty piece of iron on my desk to get that kind of work done. And it just gets faster and faster, and they have the advantage of knowing in the back room what's happening with Apple Silicon and stuff like that. So when they release software for these hardware platforms, it's inexpensive, it's incredibly efficient and fast, and you just get really productive if you're in this system. And that's how I felt about it. I'm doing so much work now in areas that I never thought I would do as a video editor, the whole audiobook things and the amount of graphics I can do. These aren't my core skills, but I've learned to do them because my system does them incredibly easily and efficiently. And that to me means more than all the rest of what are the big guys using, whatever. But everybody's different about this. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, Alex said that Apple didn't think that immersive video would sell Vision Pros. And the problem is not the problem has been the camera, and then the other problem with it is maintaining the metadata from the camera to the Apple Vision Pro. And the only company in the world that could do the whole pipeline is Blackmagic. Like, there's not anybody else that can do it because they have the ability to build the camera and they have the ability. Trying to get all these different companies to work together, it would have been very difficult. So the thing is the only company that can make that work, in a unified manner is Blackmagic, and so that's and to do the infrastructural changes to Final Cut to do immersive video, they do spatial video right now. So you can edit your spatial video on Final Cut at the moment. But when it comes to immersive, they're going to hand it off to Resolve. I don't think they're ever going to try to do it and I think that they were going down the path that they were going to try to do that. They hired Tim Dashwood, and they've got, I think they have some spherical stuff, but I think that it proved to be the infrastructural challenges, I think, proved to be more than what I think Apple is willing to spend on. The problem that Apple has also is Apple's number one competitor right now is governments. So their whole problem is really their only competitors in most markets is really antitrust. So if they win, if they turn this marketing thing up and they could easily turn the teams up and win the editing market, and it would be just one more place that the EU would use as an example against them in some legal battle. So they really can't just dive into these things and kind of crush all the competitors with engineering and marketing because it's a very small part of their business model. And so why risk? Why have yet another little thing that someone can hang on to when they talk about antitrust? Because you'd have Adobe complaining and Avid complaining and everybody complaining and trying to do what Spotify and all these other jokers are doing. So it opens up to another thing, and this is just we're small fry for Apple. It's a big company.
Interesting discussion. Let's go to our next question.
Next one comes in from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Jason asks, when teaching over Zoom, I find standing improves my delivery more than sitting. I don't see a lot of virtual presenters doing this. Could you stand and deliver office hours?
Stand and deliver. Jason Bache, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I have done, and I've tried to do this less and less. But as a rule, my whole studio is designed so that I can stand and not be that much higher in camera for exactly that reason, because I'm ADHD. And over the last 5 years, through office hours, actually, I've kind of taught myself that if I kind of focus the energy inward, my delivery can be better even when I'm being stationary. But yes, I too prefer to stand, and there's nothing wrong with that if you're doing it well.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah. So the problem that I have is that I if I stand, I move around too much, and so it's just hard for me to maintain frame. And so seated does that. Also, I have a lot of things in front of me, so I've got 9 monitors and 2 iPads and switcher and everything else that's all part of my training module that's here. And then the result is that it'd be very difficult for me to stand and make this any better. I do get up a lot, so between every meeting, between all these other things, sometimes you'll jump into a meeting and I'm walking around. It's because I just sat for a while and I'm trying to stretch out a little bit. So I don't sit all day, but I do find it easier because everything is kind of like a cockpit setup for me. I've got buttons everywhere and things to tap on that would, if I stood up, it'd be just more difficult for me to get to things.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, this is one of those depends things. We used to do the 2-hour show, so we used to have the second hour, and I think that a lot of us liked having the ability to sit. In the studio that I used to have, you notice that I had here a desk that was high enough that I could stand, and then I had a touch screen behind me, and then I can cut and get a close-up, and then I could talk about that thing, and then cut over to a computer screen, or let's see, towards the end here, I think I jump over to the computer screen. Yeah, so you can see that I'm just using an ATEM to switch between the computer desktop and show off things like the FTP server, and then cut back to the wide shot. You'll notice here earlier I was talking about using a head-worn mic. We used to have neighbors above our studio that were loud, and I just didn't know when they were going to get loud, and that was that problem solver for me because I used to use shotgun mics in there, but then the neighbors would do something loud, and all of a sudden that would be a bad take, and especially if you're live, just having a high-quality headset can work wonders. But yeah, this is a green screen with a touch screen, and then I think I had like 3 or 4 sources for being able to do this live. But yeah, I like standing if I'm going to be going for a long time. It's just an energy thing.
Courtney Gooden.
Well, I agree that standing up is better for your posture, especially if you're delivering to a crowd. If you don't want to be static on a stage if you're delivering to a live crowd. And this is why TED Talks, of course, they have that little red circle that you have to stand in to keep you from wandering around the stage too much, to keep you in the range of the cameras and lets you still stand and deliver to a crowd. Now, if you're doing like we do office hours where we're delivering to a camera, rather a single camera generally, instead of a crowd, and a lot of us here use a teleprompter to save eye contact for the camera, which we have stuff superimposed on that teleprompter we need to be able to see. And if we wander off too far from it, seeing it, I know in my situation would be difficult, even though I'm not using a teleprompter. So it just keeps me, I agree with Alex, it keeps me rooted in front of all the things within easy reach. I have to be able to have a screen over here, a screen here, I have columns here, and a keyboard here, and a mixer and a switcher over here. And if I were to take one step away from where I'm sitting right now, I wouldn't be able to reach at least one or two of those things. So stand and deliver would definitely help my back, perhaps, but my feet would be worn out by the end of the 2 hours.
Choose your poison. Alex Lindsay, you had another thought?
All this discussion of stand and deliver just has me want to listen to Adamant. That's all I got to say.
Don't forget, if you value what we do here, there are a few ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can volunteer at officehours.global/volunteer, become part of the team that makes all this possible, or you can donate if you'd simply like to help us out. Donate at officehours.global/donate. We are a 501c3. Next question.
Oh, that's me. I need to stand and deliver here. From Brett Wegenclear, I think that's, let's see, Wegelair, from Western Australia. What do you mean when you refer to double ending? I asked Perplexity, but none of its answers fit the context.
Alex is going to help you out here. Alex?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Brett, because it's really good. We say a lot of things in shorthand from radio or whatever, and we don't think through it. So in broadcast, this has been done for many, many years, decades. And what we call double ending is that we record on both ends. So it's double ending. Both ends are being recorded. And so you have a discussion, and the way this used to work is before we had high-speed connections, we would use POTS lines. And so we would, I'm showing my age now, but we would use POTS lines. And POTS line is a plain old telephone system. The telephone system. Plain old telephone. And or service, telephone service or system. And so basically get on the phone. We'd have something that would tie our mics into the phone. and that can have a wide variety of tools to do those things. And then a hybrid is what we used to call it. And so we take a hybrid, and you both talk over the phone, but you're recording at your local radio station, or they're recording at their, two different locations. You have a good mic or whatever, and you record both ends, and then the far side or both of us would send them to somebody else, and they'd edit it all back together again. And so the advantage of that, of course, is that we didn't have to figure out how we were going to talk over time, and it was very low latency. POTS lines were actually pretty good across the country as far as low latency goes. That evolved to ISDN, where you didn't need to actually do that. I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, we started doing these ISDN lines. And so that allowed us it was a high enough bandwidth that we were able to make that happen. And then we moved to, of course, the internet. And so that started to get better. And now we have Zoom. The problem when we have Zoom or anything else, when you can't double end, you're really dependent on the other person's connection and your connection, but really the other person's connection is typically the problem. This show is pretty clean, and the reason this show is pretty clean is because all of us have wired connections. We have reasonably fast internet. Those things work. But even then, we have some variance. Bill was talking very fast yesterday and had a couple breakups because of his line. Now, if I was doing an interview with Bill, that'd be a bummer, right? Like that would be like, oh, well, there's nothing to do to fix it if I was recording on the far end. But if Bill was recording locally as well as us talking, that's the double end. He can send me that record. And so there are a couple companies that specialize in double ending, Riverside and Squadcast, which is now part of I don't know, that auto tool. I always want to call them Discord, but they're not. So anyway, but Squadcast will those will record on both ends and allow you to then bring those together and put them together. So what we'd like to see for podcasts and interviews and so on and so forth is something like Zoom do that. And we've been campaigning for it for years. At one point, they announced it a couple of years ago. We still haven't seen it yet, but we were campaigning to see if we had that, then we have the tool that we most prefer to talk to each other on, able to record locally to our drives, and then we can make sure that those interviews work well. So we'll see but that's what double ending is, and that's what we're trying to get to. But again, a lot of people are using Riverside's probably the most used for double ending, Squadcast being probably the second most used for double ending, and but both of them would probably fade pretty quickly if Zoom decided to go down that path. Descript, by the way, I always want to say Discord, but it's Descript. Is the own Squadcast or merged with Squadcast or something. Their businesses became one.
Next question.
Next one comes all the way in from Tromsø, Norway. Ronnie Hofsey wants us to answer the question: when is a blurred background blurred enough? Alex versus Guy versus Bill.
The battle of the blurs, Alex.
I really think that it's a balance between how much good stuff you have behind you and how much junk is behind you. So I have a lot of junk on my wall of depreciation. It's kind of not organized as well as it should be. And as a result, I like to keep it out of focus because it all looks relatively good as long as it's really out of focus. If I started bringing it closer or I started to increase the depth of field, I would probably have to straighten things up a little bit.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, one thing I hate, I like the amount of focus that out of focus that Bill has and Alex has. Alex, maybe I'd like a little more focus. If you have,
but then I'd have to clean it up. That's the whole this whole thing. You think that there's some kind of design here? Then you'd have to use
a lens that costs less than $3,000.
It's this is like yeah.
Anyway, one thing I hate though is artificial blur on the background. I cannot deal with that. I think you should have just enough bokeh to make book jackets out of focus so you can't read them because those are distracting if you have a bookcase in back of you. So just enough blur that you can kind of tell what's back there, but not be too distracting to wonder, what does it say on that award back there? No, so that you can read the labels on things. You don't want it sharp enough for that. And the artificial blur that you get from all the Zoom and all the other Facebook plugins these days, I detest that because parts of your face are suddenly going in and out of blur and your ear disappears and things like that. I just can't stand it.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just using a Micro Four Thirds camera. It's an older Z cam. If I had the cash, I'd go get something with a full frame. And I'm really impressed with Strata's Michael Cioni's setup. He's got an Area Alexa with a prime lens, and I mean, it just looks gorgeous. So if you look at his stuff, it looks so good. So it just depends on how much you want to dump into your studio and your look. When I had the red Komodo downstairs with some of you may remember that look. I mean, it was gorgeous. So, but that was also a lot of money. That was probably dumping, $12,000 just into a lens and camera.
Yeah. Philosophically, as somebody who's shot a lot, for me, I just want people not to get distracted. You want their focus on the person that is speaking, to have an interesting background, but not distracting. And that's, it's an aesthetic choice, and you decide how much. And then basically the lens you use and the amount of light you use determines aperture, which determines depth of field, and you use that to keep what you want in focus, and put whatever you don't want in focus at some form of out of focus so it doesn't get distracting. That's really the philosophy behind the whole thing. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Jack asks, my DIT station is not up to the job. I'm using an M4 Mac Mini Pro with a CFExpress reader and an external SD card reader, but I'm only processing 2 cards at a time. Can the panel recommend a better solution?
And for those of you who aren't into it, DIT is a digital intermediate technology or technician. It's somebody on the set who's taking the camera cards and backing them up before it gets into the production process. Alex?
Yeah, it depends on where the bottleneck is. So when you're looking at it, is it just the number of cards that you're connecting to it? Jack says he needs more inputs. Obviously there's, as you start to think about possibly setting up, something that's a Thunderbolt 5 breakout or something like that, which would give you more. And again, you're dealing with you have a Mac Mini Pro, so you've got a bunch of lanes. So you should have enough speed to make that actually work. One of the things that I've used in the past, I haven't used it recently, so I don't want to say, oh, this is the right thing, but something to look at are these docks from SanDisk. And so we've used these, and you can get this Pro dock here, where you can slide these individual ones into it. And so I don't know where it is here. There we go. This Pro dock here. So what it does is it lets you, you basically set up your Thunderbolt directly into your computer or network, and you slide the different captures into those pieces there. And so we definitely had those in the past, and they worked great. But I don't know. I don't know if they've kept up. I don't know what Thunderbolt that is yet. It was great when we used it, but that was a couple of years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So, but basically, what these Pro docks did is we could put in all the different things that we wanted, but we only had one connection. So, what that would allow you to do, depending on the speed that you need to do, you could have 2 or 3 of those and have 8 or 12 of these things. Then you're now dealing with drive speed, so you're going to move that bottleneck around. But this should be able to send, transfer. I believe we were getting, about 1.5 gigs a second from this thing, if I remember correctly, when we used it in the past. So you'd have a couple of those. Mickey pointed out that there's Lexar makes versions of this as well. So take a look at those two. But those are kind of these docks that let you put different things into them and then have one Thunderbolt connection. You are looking for Thunderbolt, not USB-C, a Thunderbolt connection in. Because I believe that Pro, the Mac Pro Mini, the Mini Pro, I believe has either 4 or 5 lanes of 4 lanes of Thunderbolt. So each one of those lanes is going to be capable of a lot of bandwidth. And again, you're going to have to save one of the lanes for the drive, but you do have the opportunity to be able to dump. Jack wants to be able to dump 6 cards at a time, and with 2 of these docks and
no
drive,
problem,
you should be able to put them all in and pull them all out.
Yeah, you might also want to look at the software that's out there that manages these, does checksum verification that every single bit is getting to where it needs to go for all these copies. I, for a long time, used Hedge, which has now been rebranded Offshoot because Hedge is the company name. But Offshoot, and there are other tools that are similar, allows you to batch these things, set them up. They'll be running, and even if something interrupts and you get an error, you put it back in, it typically has saved everything up to that point, and it gets you faster to the end of a verified copy that is solid and has gone where you want it to. So
yeah, I would say probably like shot put or hedge or the new version of hedge. Those are the 2 leaders.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jeremy Murray in St. John, New Brunswick, California. Elgato now lets you turn any device into a Stream Deck. Thoughts on this link from James Helldane?
We didn't have anybody raise a hand on this one. I don't know. I use a few Elgato things, but I don't use that specifically. Courtney Gooden, you have a thought on that as we finish up
I
here?
just briefly took a look at it, and it's basically a piece of software that lets you emulate a Stream Deck on a computer or a Raspberry Pi or any single board computer type device. I thought that Focus Companion does the same thing, so I'm not sure how it differentiates itself from that.
It may not be differentiating; it may just be copying it.
Yeah,
it's like, how about we do that? So I don't know if it's trying to do something different.
Jason, you had a quick comment?
Yeah, what makes it different, if this is, I didn't follow the link, is if this is the iOS version, it will allow more than one computer to be executed to. And it's $50 flat. Yeah, I played around with it, but no, I like the hardware.
Thank you for joining us today. This is what we do every single day, and our huge thanks go out to the producers, all of you who asked questions and put them into the question queue. There were a lot of great discussions both in the show and offline in Mukana, so as always, we learned a lot today. To the panelists who come and provide their expertise every single day, thank you all so much for being here and being so generous to put your years of experience into the process. We really appreciate it. And to the back-end crew, those amazing teams of all sorts of people. You'll see some of the names go by on the back end as we roll our credits, but there is a giant community of people who do all the things that are necessary to make this show happen every day, and we appreciate each and every person involved. Our Talk Traversal today, if you were to go around and find people to get these answers from, you would have had to travel 30,000 miles. That's 48,000 kilometers, 239 million bananas for scale. We'll see you tomorrow.
Just found that convergence video that you sent me, Alex, of Santa Claus meditating. It's actually really cool. Totally forgot about that.
There we go. It's all about Santa meditating. It's got to get, you got to think about it before the flight.
Santa is the most zen.
Yeah, exactly. Is he?
Well, he does have to judge. I mean, naughty or nice.
I know, exactly.
That's not very zen to judge.
He has a
gonna
horrible work schedule.
Exactly.
Or is it great?
It's right, it's
or
right
the best
before.
work schedule.
364
exactly.
days
So
off.
much work. It's so much work, and then it's just like, I think he just meditates the rest of the time. He probably meditates like
It's
8
all
hours
recovery.
a day. It's like he's like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the middle of the day, 2 hours in the evening, and